Hello and welcome to the latest instalment of GBN America with me, Patrick Christys. Now, we have an extra special guest today. It is Andrew Giuliani, who is, of course, an American politician, also the son of former mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us today on GBN America. Great to have you on the show. I would just like to kick us off a little bit, if that's okay, because you were a special assistant to the president, associate director of the Office of Public Liaison during the Trump administration. You are gearing up for a vice presidential debate, aren't you, as well? So if we could start by discussing that, how do you see that going?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think the vice presidential nominee, Senator Vance, is really well prepared for Governor Walz tonight. It'll be overnight here in Great Britain, but it'll be at 9 o'clock Eastern here in New York. So right after we end up finishing our interview, I'm actually going to head on up about 3 miles up the road here. That's where this will be recorded in New York City. And we'll meet with a bunch of the supporters of President Trump and Vice President Vance, and we'll get some peaceful rallies going on, and we'll have some surrogate work before and after the debate. But I think the vice presidential nominee, JD Vance, is ready to go for this debate. It's important that he shows that he's ready to serve on day one, just in case the worst happens to President Trump. I mean, we've seen what's happened just over the last 3 months with 2 assassination attempts. So you hate to say this is something that's theoretical. And as somebody who's known President Trump all my life, I hate even thinking about it. But sadly, this is the reality we're living in America, in politics right now. So I think Senator Vance is going to do very well tonight.
Yeah, indeed. And just one more on this one then. So what should his key attack lines be? Because during the last presidential debate, I thought that Trump didn't necessarily nail the key attack lines for Kamala. So how does JD Vance go about, winning this particular debate then?
I think it's talking about how much better the Trump years were than the Biden-Harris years for the American people, and just asking, were you better off in 2018, 2019, or are you better off now? And whether you talk about inflation, whether you talk about most Americans' take-home income, whether you talk about our southern border, which has been, you're talking about 14, 15 million illegal immigrants coming through to cities all across the United States of America. Nobody thought New York City would be a southern border town. It is now. I think you harp on those 2 issues and you're playing offense if you're Senator Vance right there. And I think he's going to spend a lot of the debate tonight talking about that and speaking directly to the American people and saying, hey, do you want a great American comeback, or do you want the same of the last 3.5 years with borders or Kamala Harris?
Yeah, 100%. That border issue is just an absolute nightmare. I say it a lot on this show, but we think we've got issues over here, and we do. But you've got it on steroids over there. Let's just focus in a little bit, if that's okay, on what's going on in New York at the moment. So Eric Adams, elected as New York's 110th mayor in November 2021, now facing federal charges, making him the first sitting New York City mayor to be indicted. Can you talk us through what's going on there, please?
Yeah, absolutely. And Mayor Adams was indicted just last week. And basically what it alleges is that he took donor money from straw donors in Turkey when he was first off, the borough president of Brooklyn, which he was preceding his mayoralhood, which started in 2022. And then when he became mayor, he greenlit a project for the Turkish consulate, a big building for them, passed through the fire codes, passed through all that. That's one of the main issues that's been unsealed so far. There are other indictments that may be coming down. One of the things that I've seen a lot and a lot of talk about is kind of a lot of parallels between Mayor Adams and President Trump, in the sense that as soon as Mayor Adams started talking about how big of a problem illegal immigration was for New York City, all of a sudden the Biden Justice Department started to knock down on his supporters, started to look into this. And I think that there definitely are some parallels between this Department of Justice going after political opponents, whether it be Donald Trump or maybe even a fellow Democrat like Eric Adams. The only thing that I would say here is there may be a lot of there. Obviously, Eric Adams has innocence until they can actually prove him guilty. But we've seen a whole lot of smoke in this case here, and is going to be a tough one for the mayor to dig out of.
So apparently he's filed a motion to dismiss one of the bribery charges against him in a corruption case here, saying that he didn't accept bribes when he urged Fire Department of New York leaders to expedite the opening of a Turkish consular building. I imagine that's some of the smoke that you're talking about there, some of his previous actions, which possibly look a little bit squiffy in light of the money that's allegedly come his way. But what does this speak to, do you think, to corruption in New York City, if indeed this is true?
It's a good question in terms of what that actually looks like more wide from a political standpoint in New York, and not just New York, other American cities as well. We've seen this happen in Chicago and Philadelphia throughout the decades. This is not anything that's new. I mean, you could go back in the New York City annals to Tammany Hall, and you'll still have corrupt bosses being referred to as the boss Tweeds, and that's the famous Tammany Hall that used to ultimately control so many voters and so many unions and control City Hall for those favors. I don't really know what it speaks to widely. All I would say is this administration has been really draped in corruption, whether it be the former police commissioner who had to recently step down, whether it be some of the closer supporters of Eric Adams. Again, the government still needs to prove their case. And I think, and this is kind of one of the scary things about all this, I don't know if the government actually would have looked into this if Eric Adams wasn't speaking out about the southern border and about the effect of New York in an election year. You got to remember, that's so important about all this. You had the Biden administration at the time. Biden was running. It was 18 months before the election was about to take place. And the number one issue in the United States of America, or number two issue, inflation and the border. And all of a sudden you had a Democratic mayor, somebody that so many people call the rising star, was starting to focus on this issue. And I think that's when the DOJ started to look at him right there. That doesn't mean that he's not necessarily guilty of these charges, but it does mean that this DOJ, in all likelihood, took a political opponent, a political nuisance, if you will, and said, we've got to silence him.
Well, they always have something in the bank on everyone, don't they? And then they can bring that up at a time of their choosing, which if they have chosen to do it because he's chiming in about the border issue, then that would make a lot of sense, wouldn't it? But let's talk a bit about that. I'm quite keen. Look, I don't know what your relationship is like with your father. I don't need to go into that particularly, but I'm quite keen to know what you think your dad would have done about this border issue in relation to New York City. Do you think he'd have let it get this bad?
Absolutely not. I think he would have used the courts. I think he would have filed lawsuits all the time. First off, unlike Eric Adams, who invited illegal migrants originally into this, actually went down to Port Authority and greeted the first illegal migrants coming in, called the governor of Texas racist. He would have simply worked with the governors of Texas, with the governors of Florida, with other like-minded governors who were actually looking for solutions in this major crisis. He would have tried to actually work with a Democratic president, as he did with Bill Clinton, who was the president for 7 out of the 8 years of his mayoralty, to try to come up with solutions. Now, the Biden administration, in all likelihood, did not want to find a solution to this problem, actually opened up the problem in the first place when you look at the numbers in 2019 and 2020. But he immediately would have worked with other mayors on the border in Texas, Arizona, New Mexico. He would have worked with governors to make sure they would have stemmed this problem, and you would not have had what has been hundreds of thousands of illegal migrants come into New York City, getting taxpayer funding that hardworking New Yorkers should deserve. That's really the whole point of this. It should be the hardworking New Yorkers that are paying into the tax base that sadly have also seen the effects of inflation on their bottom line and on their families' bottom lines, that should be actually getting the benefits that are going to illegal migrants here in New York. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, it's absolutely bonkers what's going on over there and the amount of freebies that people who just arrived to the country are getting. There's two aspects to this, which is if they have decided to take him down because of his newfound stance on borders, he's recently just looked into his heart and just recently miraculously decided that all of a sudden he believes in a strong border, which, I find hard to believe, but there we go. It could be that they don't like him for going against a political line in an election year and highlighting an issue that the Biden administration is responsible for. There could also be something a bit more sinister behind it. And I have always had my question marks over why they are content for so many people to be flooding into the United States of America from different countries, from different cultures. Do you think there could be something to that? Is there another agenda here behind the obvious potential for just incompetence?
Yeah, I think it's both. I mean, if you look actually at Ray Kelly, who was a former commissioner of the police department of New York City for 12 years, he actually ran customs back in the 90s before it was ICE, when it was just U.S. Customs. He just talked about that just the other day, the fact that this is a plan by Democratic lawmakers to try to get voters in perpetuity. So I don't think they're necessarily mutually exclusive. And I think it's actually a really, really smart point when you look at actually both of this, that you could have both situations going on at the same time. One is kind of a short to medium term to make sure that you win power in 2024. And one is a much longer term play for, let's call it the end of the decade, to make sure that you have more voters that are more inclined to work for you. Now, the thing that's so amazing about all this, if you actually look at it, is that a lot of voters in the United States of America have looked at this and said, this is an issue that that maybe, let's say, call it Hispanic and Black Americans all over the country, that went overwhelmingly for Joe Biden, overwhelmingly for Hillary Clinton, and have been in the Democratic bank for years and years and years in terms of the election. They are starting to swing toward President Trump. He's not going to win Hispanics or African Americans, but he is closing that gap by about 12 to 15 points. And if you think about the electoral map, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Detroit, Michigan, Atlanta, Georgia, to name a few, you have very, very high both Hispanic and African American populations. That can really, really play big come November in the election.
Yeah, it could, because there's another idiocy to all of this, which is it's all very well and good saying that they can load the dice with a load of future Democrat voters. But, I mean, I'm not sure how often gang members vote. And if I have a look here at this Venezuelan gang, Trenda Aragua, who I'm probably pronouncing incorrectly. I hope I don't get a bullet in the back of the head for that. But, you know, they are apparently just running rampant. But it's not just that. I mean, it's right across the country. You know, essentially letting gangs in to get a foothold in a country. And that must be something that, whether you are Black, Hispanic, white, Chinese, but you are someone who is legal and working hard, you don't want an increase of gang culture where you live, do you?
Of course not. And it's just the same idea as, hey, look, if you live in a tough neighborhood, right, the tougher the neighborhood that you live in, the more you want police presence, the more you actually want law and order. So I think that's not just a great point, but I think that's something that Americans have started to talk about. You're seeing that in polling. I think you're going to see that come the ballot box in November, that people are saying, hey, look, you know what, this southern border has become a real issue. This is not just something that a leftist media, which 8 years ago was calling it xenophobic, is. This is actually a real problem that's having a real effect, not just on our economy, but on our safety and our quality of life.
Yeah, exactly. Look, they'll try and wheel out all the old tricks, won't they? Oh, you're a racist, or you're a bigot, and all of that. I mean, language is very important. Language is vitally important when you're looking to shift a debate. So, you know, if you're calling them dreamers as opposed to illegal immigrants, that can help change the rhetoric significantly there. Just one final one with you, just in light of everything that we've spoken about here today, really. What is the urgent need for a Trump administration? So how damaging could it be for America if you end up with Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, as opposed to what you could get with Trump and JD Vance? I mean, you know, 15 million people coming over in the last few years, that's a lot. There's a lot more damage, presumably, that could be done in the fullness of the next term.
Absolutely. I think you could just look at the policies of the Biden administration. Kamala Harris was the border czar. She is responsible for opening up this border. And she's obviously trying to run away from it now. She's trying to do last minute visits to the border to try to say that this was not her responsibility. We all know from the very first year that she was responsible. Joe Biden made her responsible. And sadly, we've had this complete debacle on our southern border, which has affected all 50 states of the United States because Kamala Harris wanted to open this border. I think you look at inflation, which has been a massive hit on so many Americans right there. Remember, it went up to 9% under this Biden-Harris administration. Now they're celebrating the fact that it's down to 3%. Well, guess what? That's still close to double what it was under the Trump administration term. Plus, you don't get that 9% back. It still went up 9%. Now, if it's going up 3.5%, your groceries still cost you 25, 30, 35% more. Same thing with gas. You want to talk about America being energy independent right there? That happened under a Trump administration. What's one of the first things that Kamala Harris did when she was sitting 15 steps away from the Oval Office? They made sure that America was not energy independent again because they wanted to deal with the green zealots. That's just three issues. We could go on until the vice presidential debate talking about all the different reasons why, but I think it's pretty simple. Do you want somebody who really actually espouses to neo-Marxist beliefs in Kamala Harris, or do you want somebody that actually believes in capitalism, that believes in America first, that believes in freedom from government? That's Donald J. Trump.
Look, Andrew, I don't know if you can get a JD Vance mask and put it on and do the debate tonight, but I'm sure a lot of people would feel very strongly that you should. Some tremendous answers there. I do wish you all the best. I do hope to talk to you again very, very soon here on GBN America. There's no shortage of stuff to talk about from your neck of the woods, so I look forward to chatting to you again very soon, my good man. Take care.
Absolutely. Thank you for the time.